My name is Monisha Rajesh and I'm a London-based journalist. I'm also a travel writer for newspapers in the UK and abroad, and I've just written my first travel book around India in 80 trains. I decided to go around India by train because I was reading an article at work one day about how India's domestic airlines could reach 80 different cities. And I was quite curious about this because I had lived in India very briefly when I was 9, and I had really not seen any of the country as a tourist. I looked at the map and I could see that this network rippled out across the country into all the nooks and crannies, into places that the airlines couldn't reach. And so I decided that travelling by train would be much nicer because I could reach much further and I could also talk to people in a way that you can't on planes. I decided to travel by 80 trains because I took inspiration from Jules Verne's book Around the World in 80 Days and decided to recreate the adventure for myself. I did some basic planning for this trip. I met a friend of a friend who's a photographer who was also planning to travel in Asia at the same time, so we decided to combine our trips, and we spent 5 weeks with a map of India spread out on a table and a handful of pins that we put into different spots in the country depending on certain events rather than places. I think travelling by train in India is a very special experience because the Indian railways are like no other in the rest of the world. People will talk to you all the time. They always want to ask questions. They want to know where you live, what you do, how much you earn, what your parents do, why you aren't married, and you're never alone, in a way that I think when you travel in England, you always are. And the Indian railways are a microcosm of society because they really teach you how Indian society is structured. You can go from one end of the train in first class and see ambassadors and politicians and businessmen, and then you can walk 37 carriages down to the other end and be sitting on wooden slats with farmers and a class of 30 children all sharing fruit and chattering in the doorways. It's very easy to travel by train in India because almost everybody speaks English. In the south, most people will talk to you in English straight away. The further north you go, the fewer people will speak in English, but everybody always wants to practice with you. I made sure that I included a good variety of trains when I travelled around the country to make sure that people could see both extremes. So I travelled on luxury trains, including the Indian Maharaja Deccan Odyssey and the Golden Chariot, which is a lesser known train in the south. And I also travelled on Mumbai commuter trains and travelled at rush hour just to see what it was like. And I also found a hospital train called the Lifeline Express, which has been running for just over 20 years and invites poor people on board to do surgery for afflictions from polio or for cataract surgery, ear surgery, and they've now started counselling people for epilepsy as well. And I think that was the most eye-opening train for me because it made me see that the Indian Railways really is the lifeline of a nation, which is its nickname. And it also travels across one of the highest bridges in the world. And it's quite a stunning route. There are a lot of different routes and itineraries that you can choose in India, depending on how much time you have or who you're travelling with. One particular route that I would recommend is along the Konkan Railway, which is on the western coast of India, and it starts up in Mumbai and goes down to Goa. And it's a particularly lovely route because it has the Arabian Sea on one side and the Western Ghats hillsides on the other. And you can also travel with the doors open and you can squeeze past coconut groves and mango groves, and sometimes you can actually reach out and grab leaves through the windows. I met an incredible variety of people during my 4 months. For example, I met 3 members of parliament who were travelling in my compartment once from Delhi to Chennai, which was a 31-hour journey. So you do end up chatting a lot about everything that you're doing. And they were very curious about my journey and wanted to know which bits of the country I had travelled to. And I said I wanted to go to Assam, in the northeast of the country. And it turned out that one of them was from Assam, and he promised to arrange a journey for me and to organise tours around the tea estates. And after they'd gone, a woman in the compartment next to me was laughing at me and said, "Oh, you will never hear from them again, and you're foolish to think that they will help you." And I was quite disappointed by this. It turned out that they did help me, and when I arrived in Assam, there was an armoured jeep waiting for me with police guards, and I was taken to a beautiful tea estate and given a tour around Assam for 4 days.